Good to talk with you, Ron.
Hey, David. How are you?
Good. We're finally coming to what I guess it might be the defining case of your career. Would you put it that way? I mean, you've had a lot of big moments.
Defining case of my prosecutorial career.
Okay.
Yes, by far.
This is the case of Katrina Montgomery. There are a lot of stories in America and otherwise about missing girls that lead you into revealing a whole world of criminality. And this is one of those stories. And this story is one that will take us a few episodes to get through. But I wondered if you could sort of get us on solid ground and sort of orienting us in time and space of when you first hear about the case of Katrina Montgomery. You and I have spoken a little bit about your career and where you were in the 90s, coming out of law school and being a government attorney. We covered a lot of that stuff. But at this point, it's around the mid-90s that you start hearing about this case. Is that right?
97, May of 97 is when I first heard about it. I was at something called the Homicide Symposium. I was new to what the DA's office called major crimes. Major crimes was the homicide high-profile unit of the DA's office. Mm-hmm. It was like, if you're a trial lawyer, it was the most prestigious unit you could be in the office. The spots in major crimes were hard to come by. It was always my goal when I started in that office in 93 to get to major crimes within a couple of years. And in 96, right after my daughter was born, actually, mm-hmm. I was promoted to major crimes by the district attorney, Bradbury. And I caught my first homicide case that November of 96. And I was working it and getting ready for the trial when I was invited to go to this thing called the Homicide Symposium in Monterey, California. The Homicide Symposium is where, I think they still have it, where all the prosecutors in the state who are prosecuting murders get together for a huge conference. They talk about changes in the law, evidence, prosecution techniques, innovative investigation styles, what's working, what's not working, things like that. And you have investigators and prosecutors there. They put on presentations on various topics, and there's lots of mingling amongst the professionals. And it was, as the newest person in major crimes in my office, it was a huge opportunity for me. Our whole unit went, all the investigators went. Mm. I mean, the office paid, and we're staying at a really nice place in Monterey. I mean, it's a pretty cool place to go for a conference.
For a murder conference.
Yeah. And all you do is discuss homicides, prosecution, investigations. And they have different tracks. They have an investigation track. They have a prosecution track. And I took courses on both sides because I was really interested in the investigation of murders. I can imagine
people talking a lot about DNA at that moment, because I remember the 90s and the OJ trial. Like, DNA was just a huge conversation, among other things, I can imagine.
It was. I actually learned a lot about DNA at that conference. Mm-hmm. I still actually have a DNA manual from that conference in my office right now, which I haven't looked at in about 25 years.
Is this a national conference? Is like people from all over the country coming in, or is it California?
Mostly California, because also at the time, the death penalty was still being used in California, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. I don't know if people were being killed, but it was still being sought pretty frequently in California. So they had a whole death penalty conference part. And I really, at that time, wanted to have that experience of trying a death penalty case, at least if there was one that I thought I could do. I was against the death penalty, but there were certain, even those against the death penalty have certain exceptions, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Like the second or third day of the conference, which was a week long, my supervisor in the major crimes unit, a guy named Richard Holmes, caught me at lunch and said, "Hey, I'm giving you a new case." And when you're new to doing those types of cases, any case is a cool case. And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "Yeah, I want you to meet with me, an investigator, and another prosecutor tonight at dinner to go over it." I said, "What's the case about?" And he said, "A missing girl named Katrina Montgomery. LAPD investigated for a while. None of the locals would take it to investigate. Mike Bradbury met with the victim's mom, and after meeting with her, he decided that he wanted to help her, so he took the case. He assigned it to this guy named Matt Hardy. And this was in 95.
Bradbury is the district attorney in Ventura at this point, right?
He is the district attorney in Ventura, yes. And
Can you tell us a little bit about his approach at that moment? Because he was a name that was and is a big name in the history of Ventura County law enforcement.
Yeah, he is.
We don't have to get into the whole details of Mike Bradbury, but I think it'd be useful for people to know kind of what was his approach to crime, and why did he want to pursue this case that the LAPD had just sort of given up on.
Okay, why he wanted to pursue the case? There could be a variety of reasons. I think mostly because Katrina's mom was an attractive woman who cried in his office, and he felt sorry for her, and he wanted to help her. I think that's that'd be the number one reason. But what he was always had the image of a hard charging, aggressive prosecutor. He used to say that in Ventura County, we have a no deals policy. We don't make deals on case, which not exactly true. Okay.
My professor, Judge Sabo, has said the same thing. He's like, they say we don't deal in Ventura County, but he's like, we make deals all the time.
All the time. That's the way the world works. Anyway,
he did the Hang 'em High Ranch guy. Is that right?
That's it. And that's one of the, I remember I'd been here almost, 4 or 5 months. He invited me to a barbecue at his ranch in Ojai, and he wrote the address on top. It said Hang 'em High Ranch and the address. And I thought, this has to be bullshit. There's no way the DA lives at Hang 'em High Ranch. There's no effing way. And then lo and behold, I pull up and there it is, Hang 'em High Ranch.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, how does he get away with this stuff? But he was a character here, and he ran the county. And when I say ran the county, I mean he was by far the most powerful political figure in this county when he was district attorney. And everybody knew it, and he would use that power to his advantage when he needed to. He was also a very charismatic guy. I always say, when I interviewed with him, it was the first time I was in an interview where I received more bullshit than I gave.
And you give a lot.
I give a lot. And he was just one of those guys. He was a character. I liked him. I always liked him. Even when we opposed each other, I still liked him.
He seems representative of the county in some ways in terms of the kind of politics and that hang 'em high thing. There's like the kind of cowboy thing. That attitude is in a sort of conservative politics, especially about crime in this county.
What I loved about Mike, actually, was that I think because he was so secure in his position, but maybe, and I also think this was because who he was, that guy could make a decision. Like he didn't have to wait around and get 50 people's opinions. He could make a decision. Now, he would insulate himself because he was political a lot in some of those decisions, but the man can make a decision. And when you work in government, you find there's a lot of people who can't. And it gets really frustrating in a hurry. And so that's what I liked about him. When I was promoted to major crimes, there was an opening there, and I was the youngest guy eligible for it. I didn't even know if I was eligible. I was the youngest guy who put his hat in the ring for it.
You were, what, like in your late 20s?
Late 20s, right. Wow. And there were senior prosecutors there who were trying to get the gig. And I had tried a bunch of cases, though, and I'd done really well. And I felt like, on merit, it should be my position. And everybody kept telling me there's no way he's going to give it to somebody with, 10 years, 15 years experience. I'd been in the office like 2.5 years at the time. And then one morning, I'm in the office working. He shows up and says, "Hey, Ron, you're going to be working a murder case. Here's the case. Contact VPD. We'll get you an investigator."
Did you think to yourself, is this too good to be true? Or what is this? Because it seems like this was the ambitious path you had, that you wanted to go into major crimes, that someone would...
I wanted to try murder cases because...
Give you this case.
Right. No, I wasn't like too good to be true. I was thinking about time. I don't think that way. I think like... The way it works is
I guess I'm wondering, like, were you thinking, like, oh, what are the motivations for me getting this case right now? Like, why are they giving it to me?
Well, Montgomery?
Yeah.
Oh, I knew when I got it, it was because nobody wanted it, and I was the youngest guy, and shit flows downhill.
Because it seems like they're giving you a case that is very hard to solve, and we're going to find out why, but it's a tricky case.
Well, let's put it this way. It took me about 20 minutes at that dinner to realize why I got that case. All right, we have no suspects. LAPD investigated. As soon as you hear LAPD investigated a Ventura case, and then first of all, you think it may not be a Ventura case. Second of all, you think there's no way they did a good job, because one thing I know about cops, they don't want to drive 60 miles to go talk to people. They'd rather investigate the cases that are around them, not the ones that are in another county. It involved gangs, which meant that everybody's going to be tight-lipped, and nobody found her. That's a problem in a homicide case when you have no body.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, as soon as I hear it, I'm like, what the F are we doing with this case? But then I'm thinking, this is probably a good opportunity for me if I could do it my way. That was the problem initially. And so I'm at this dinner with this guy named Matt Hardy, who was a veteran prosecutor, probably been 15, 16 years in the office then. Matt was famous for his huge temper and blowing up, but he was also a damn good trial attorney. He was the first person I watched in trial who cussed in front of a jury. And I always thought, wow. And I asked him about it afterwards. And he goes, you got to be yourself. That's who I am. And I go, it's true, because Matt could cuss. Man, he was one of the best cussers of all time.
But did he acknowledge it at all? Like, oh, pardon my French or anything?
No.
He just laid it out there.
He just talked like he was.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do when I'm in front of a jury, is I try to talk like I am. I don't cuss, because I always think that you never know your audience enough to do that. But, man, Matt was as authentic as it got in front of a jury. And I really admired him for that. I didn't admire his temper too much. I thought he was a nut job sometimes.
Is he older than you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everybody was older than me. You understand?
Right.
So Matt was in his late 40s. Richard's in his mid-50s. There was an investigator, Dennis Fitzgerald. He was also probably in his low 50s. And they're all telling me about this case, and they're basically telling me they just want me to work it up and then file a memo saying it can't be solved. That's what they wanted. That's what the DA wanted, because they wanted to get out of the office. Had been in the office for 2 years, had gone nowhere. And they said they just wanted to get a memo done by somebody who paid the victim's family some attention, who showed some empathy for them, and then just explained to them, hey, we can't solve your case, we're sorry. So that's how it was presented. That was literally how it was presented to me.
Just kind of wrap this up and placate the victim's family.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, gangs, you can deal with. You can always pressure people to talk. Matt had all these ideas that I just was like, I'm not doing any of that shit. And everybody goes, well, and I told them all at the table, I go, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to be part of the investigation. I get to do this then. And, they all agreed at the time, but not realizing what I really meant, I think. And then,
you're thinking, I'm going to work this to solve it, not work it to placate.
Oh, I was 100% going to solve it.
Yeah.
I had no doubt in my mind that I could do it. I didn't know how. I really had no clue.
Had you investigated? Why were you so? I mean, I know you have like an unbelievable confidence, Ron, in yourself.
Yeah, that helps.
But how did you feel that you could do that? Had you done something like this before in terms of just the practical investigation element?
So my first homicide case, the only one I had at that point actually, was this homicide on the Avenue. It was the first one they gave me. And the way it works in major crimes, when somebody gets killed in Ventura, at least it did at the time, I don't know if it still does, the major crimes attorney's assigned to it right away, and you go work with the cops from the beginning. And there was a case on the Avenue in a place they affectionately call Tweaker Town. Tweakers are methamphetamine addicts. Where a well-known tweaker, methamphetamine addict, was stabbed to death like 5 or 6 times. No suspects, right? And all the witnesses were either methamphetamine addicts, homeless people, or let's just say ne'er-do-wells of certain ilk. And so, the cops were like, we don't think we can do this. We can't do this. And then they gave me a few suspects and some information. And then Mark Volpe, who is one of my best friends now, but at the time we were not friends. Matter of fact, we didn't like each other much, became the assigned investigator on that case. And we became good friends during that case.
Can you describe your first meeting with him? Because it's a funny part of that story. Because Mark becomes a big character in this story.
Mark's not a character. He is the story. He is part of it. Like he is. So when I was right before I got to major crimes, literally maybe 3 weeks before I got to major crimes, I had this case where this guy had put a gun to his wife's head and pulled the trigger like 6 times. Played Russian roulette with her.
Jesus.
Okay. She literally defecated on herself in fear. Okay. And the woman was a very nice lady. Like when you met her and she told you the story, it was just like heart-wrenching, right? And so we charged this. There was a bullet in the chamber, by the way. He wanted to kill her. He failed. He failed. Yeah. And you go, well, how could he do it? Well, he's kept 6 times. There's only 6 in a revolver. Well, he kept spinning the barrel and pulling the trigger, and he went 0 for 6. Think about that.
Yeah,
okay.
Seriously.
When you hear these stories, you think, how could people be this way? And
she had God on her side on that one. Good Lord.
Yeah, and so I was prosecuting this guy for attempt murder, and we had a good statement on tape from him. The whole thing, we were going to get him, and I was literally getting ready for trial. We were going out to trial the next day, picking a jury, and this guy who was about 5'8", young-looking guy walks to my office with a very high-pitched voice and tells me that I'm not going to use the name of the guy because he ended up being an informant. Tells me that Mr. Doe, I'll use that, is going to be an informant in my case of prosecuting was over. And I'm like, who the F are you? I go, no, it's not. When I work up a case for trial, by the way, it's not just like I spend a few hours on it. I mean, I got dozens and dozens of hours into this thing. I got everything laid out. I have a formula for picking my jury, have my exhibits all charted out. I mean, I'm dialed. I'm not screwing around. It's disgusting how much time you spend getting ready for a trial. I mean, it's just, and it was a big case.
Yeah.
And he's telling me it's all over. I'm like, no, what the F? It's not all over. He goes, it is. He goes, I'll be taking, that defendant's going to be working with me. He's helping me solve an old homicide. And I said, bullshit. I go, this guy's doing life.
The Russian roulette guy.
Yeah, he's doing life. And so then I go down to a chief deputy guy named Ron James. I go, what the F is this? And he goes, yeah, Mark's right. The case is over. We're going to continue today. I'm going, no, I'm not. And he goes, Ron, you don't have a choice. You're being ordered to do this. You have no choice. And I didn't have no choice. And I was just pissed. And we have a mutual friend at the time, a woman named Donna Gissing, and he's calling Donna, bitching about me, and I'm telling her about Mark.
I remember her. I remember that name.
She helped at Mark trial.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I can't believe this, Donna. This asshole's taking my case. He's letting this guy go. And she's like, Mark's a good guy. You'll get to know him. I don't want to know this guy. So, flash forward to the Delatorre case, which I got maybe a month later when I got to major crimes, and the investigator assigned is Mark Volpe. And he calls me up because I said we're going to file the case, and he got the reports and he goes, can you tell me why this guy is guilty? And I go, well, we got 4 people who name him. He goes, you're really going to put those 4 people on the stand? And I said, well, we'll get more. And so I said, let's go do some interviews. So we started working together on the case. And that case really helped us in Katrina's case eventually, because some of the people we worked on the Avenue helped us in the investigation of Katrina Montgomery.
For those that don't know Ventura, the Avenue is sort of the working class region of Ventura, we'll put it that way. Well, at the time, it was a lot worse than it is now, I think.
Right now, it's been gentrified a great deal because people gravitated over there to buy low-cost housing, and they've built it up. But at the time, in the 90s, it was where all the methamphetamine traffic was in Ventura.
And gang activity.
We had we have the Avenue Gangsters, more of a Mexican gang, and we had skinheads out there. We had lots of dope out there. We had sheriffs and Ventura PD patrolling on special units, crime units to suppress crime. You had meth houses. You had the biggest gang in Ventura, the Hells Angels, who were...
That's right.
They had a clubhouse off the Avenue.
George Christie.
Yep. And the DA's office was after him for years, too.
There's a whole 1950s, 40s noir crime world that I feel like is in the Avenue. It just feels like a place from those types of stories.
Right.
Yeah, and it feels like this story comes a little bit out of the Avenue.
And you got a lot of houses where people just crashed and did dope. Okay, and so this guy, Kenny Wayne Beasley, he was killed in this house that was really small. It was probably, we're in a room that's twice as big as that house. Okay. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And one of the things we did for the trial to explain the murder and how it happened was Mark took a carpet the size of the house and he painted all the furniture on the carpet.
Wow.
And we put it in the wall of the jury box. The house fit in the wall of the jury box.
That's awesome. Okay.
To show everybody how tight the quarters were, and that when this guy stood up, he didn't have to run across a room. He just take one step and stab a guy. And all these people were in these tight area, and 2 of the witnesses were in that tight area. And so you could see, they saw everything. They had to see everything. But
it's an eerie foreshadowing of the Katrina Montgomery case, honestly.
Yeah. What was funny about that carpet, though, is when we went to make it, we decided for whatever reason to paint it in the middle of the DA's office, biggest area, of the office. It's right in the area where all the clerks work and everything like that. There's a big, it's like a hallway, but on the sides are cubicles, and the middle is empty, and that's where we all would do presentations, awards, retirements, things like that. So we laid this carpet out. Mark paints the carpet. We're painting the carpet all on a Saturday, and we pull the carpet up, and all of a sudden we realize all the paint had bled through onto the DA and the diagram with the carpets underneath
Oops.
it. So Mark calls his 16-year-old daughter to come bring paint thinner and his wife to get all the carpet out because we had to clean it before work started on Monday.
Yeah.
And she shows up and her first words are to us are like, maybe he had his wife and she was like younger, but she was a kid. And she goes, her first words to us was like, you guys didn't think about painting this outside?
Yeah.
And we look at each other like we are idiots.
Or putting down some drop cloths, something.
Oh, no.
It's like a sitcom scene.
We spent like 2 hours cleaning the office up with paint thinner, getting all the
I've never
paint
heard
out.
of that kind of demonstration. That's
Yeah.
like a really, I mean, I don't know how many other attorneys have used that.
I've used it a
idea.
few times now.
A little like blueprint that you could, because it's, to me, it's such like a crazy visual thing to then be like, you basically are asking the jury to imagine being in that apartment.
Exactly.
And that you as the attorney are standing there giving them the story of the murder while
Right.
you're standing in the apartment.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Matter of fact, we made it one of our first exhibits at the trial, and Mark put it into evidence, showed how he did it all, and this is where the murder happened, how we did it. And then we had all the witnesses stand it and show where they were. And I would stand in it and say, okay, look, I'm Kenny Wayne. Where was I? Show me where I'm at. That's
great.
And it worked out really well. It was awesome, actually. And it was all Mark's idea to do it, and it was great. So we became really close friends working on it because we had to work all these meth addicts, all these homeless people. We'd go to the when they would do first food service on Mondays and Wednesdays, we'd show up at that, talk to people. We'd buy hamburgers at the Top Hat, which was still working at the time, for people who cooperated. We'd buy donuts for them sometimes. And one of the main witnesses we got in that case, it was a 12-year-old boy who was the son of a woman who worked, let's say, a working woman, not with a 9-to-5 job, more from a job from like 5 to 5 a.m.
The oldest profession in the world.
Yes,
I get what you're saying.
and a parolee
So
was a
I think
stepdad.
sex worker is the term we use today. Prostitute is probably how she would be referred to in the 90s.
No, we said something else.
Okay. There are a lot of words for that.
And we find this kid, and he wouldn't talk to us, but because he said I have to talk to my parents, and we had to go in this little apartment. And she's there, and she's out of it. She's like stoned or whatever. And then the parolee is like, I'll call him Tommy. That's not his name. Was there sitting, and he's a big dude, big bushy beard. And he's like, there's no effing way my kid's testifying. He called him my kid. It wasn't his kid, but my kid's not testifying. Da, 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 da. And so he's getting pretty aggro. And we're in there without a gun because Mark didn't bring his gun. And I didn't carry one at the time. I eventually started to because of this case. And not the Delatorre case, Katrina's case. And I'm telling him, Tommy, look, this is the way it's going to happen. Like, we can either be friends or we can be enemies. Have you had a DA who's your friend? And I go, well, a DA as a friend for a guy like you could be very beneficial. Or I could fucking end your life as your enemy. What would you prefer? And he goes, all right, you can talk to him. Okay, well,
If you put it that way.
flash forwards 2 years later, that guy ends up being an essential informant on the Merriman case, on Katrina's case.
Wow.
Same guy, same parolee. So those connections that we made in Delatorre and the friendship that I bonded with Mark during the investigation made me want Mark on Katrina's case. And one of the things I asked at that dinner in Monterey was, hey, who are the investigators on the case? And they said Dennis, and I'll talk about Dennis in a second, and this guy named John Bunch. Okay, well, Bunch was like, he was a former LAPD cop. He came to Ventura to retire. Here's how you know a guy's not going to be great for your case. This is what I knew of John at the time. I'd never worked with him. This is what I knew. John was a 9-to-5er. Okay, we called him a ham and egger, right?
Yeah.
Did just the basic stuff. But at 10 to 5, John would get all his stuff ready to go, have his briefcase right by his chair, sit in his chair by the door of the DA's office to go out with a book in a manila file, like he was looking at a case file, but he was reading a novel. And an alarm, he had an alarm on his desk that would go off like an air raid siren at 5 o'clock. And as soon as that alarm went off, he would bolt out that door like he was in Black Friday Walmart sale, and they opened the front doors.
Fred Flintstone when the dinosaur.
He was that guy.
Yeah. So he's not committed.
He's not committed.
He's just working the job and
when he is assigned to a case, they're not planning on solving shit. They're just planning on like staffing it with somebody where he can't like. They'd much rather him work a case that has no chance at a positive outcome, because then you can't do any damage, than have him work a real case because there he could do damage.
You think guys like that were always like that, or is it just a product of like, well, I'm retired, I don't give a fuck anymore?
I don't know anything about John prior to my experience on this case. So I just knew who he was, and I knew I didn't want him on the case. And then when I listened to, so the homicide symposium ended on a Friday. I'm back in the office on a Saturday, and I get the Katrina Montgomery case from Matt Hardy that Saturday morning. He shows up, he gives it to me. It's like 3 binders, that's all it is. And he tells me there's other stuff somewhere. Maybe the investigators have it, whatever. I end up finding a bunch of binders under Dennis's desk and John's desk. I take everything. And I literally that weekend poured through the whole thing. And I realized right away that John had to go because his interviews were shit. And it wasn't good. Dennis, the thing about Dennis, he's old school. He's total chain of command guy. Dennis is about 5'5". He looks like the Monopoly man. People call him that. Like, that's what he looks like.
I'm imagining like a top hat and tails.
No top hat and tails, but he looks just like the guy.
Right, okay.
And I'm not joking. Like
Older dude.
Older dude. He was in his 50s. Sweetheart of a man. Good man. But really by the book. And he looks like a cop. Besides the Monopoly man thing, you'd think cop right away when you see him.
One of the things that stands out from this story that I've heard you tell before is sort of like that I wanted to get out today was sort of the difference in the detective methodologies here, the approaches, because it seems like these older guys didn't have the kind of nuanced approach that you and Mark are going to pursue. The kind of like, I don't know, the real like kind of social element of getting to know people rather than just going up to them and being like, tell me what you know or get the fuck out of here.
The facts guy. Yes. And the Joe Friday guy does not work in cases like this.
Right.
And I knew that because I dealt with a bunch of people on the other case, the Delatorre case, where you had to work them. You had to get some confidence in them. You had to do things like just show up and talk. Hey, how can I help you? And I had a really good feel for that culture. And I'd worked against gang members before in another case, not a homicide, but another case. And I kind of knew how they thought. And, this whole gang brotherhood shit that everybody talks on the streets and everything like that, I knew that was bullshit, that you can get around that. If you pressure people correctly, they'll turn on each other. There's no doubt about me. No doubt about that to me.
I know this from watching crime fiction, like The Wire, the show The Wire. It has a lot of these archetypal characters in it, and you're like one of the detectives on that show that's like sort of trying to actually work the case and using police procedures that are like what you're talking about, rather than just the fact stuff. But it seems like, where did you gather your street smarts? Where did you get your street smarts on that sort of stuff? Because it feels
look at this
going
way.
and talking to gang members, that whole world. Like, I'm thinking of myself going down there and being like, hey, guys, like, what do you know about some murders? Like, it seems like...
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't work that way.
It's a tricky thing.
Right. First, you have to understand who you're dealing with. That's number one.
Right.
You have to know who you're dealing with. And let me give you a couple examples maybe to put it in light. So, first of all, you have to understand the case. First thing I knew is that we did not have Katrina. Okay, so... And she disappeared on November 28th of 92. So I'm 5 years later, right? 4.5 years later, whatever it is. So I know I'm not getting any DNA, really. I'm probably not finding any thumbprints or fingerprints or any physical evidence. People haven't talked in 4.5 years. The odds of them talking now by just walking up to them and chatting them up are pretty low. All right. So you have to get statements from people. You have to get admissions. Okay. So you're not going to get it usually from the prime suspects to start. You have to figure out how big the circle is and work your way in.
What did they have in those binders? What were the main points?
Binders, what I knew from the binders was this, that there was a big party at this guy named Scott Porcio's house in Oxnard. Scott Porcio was the leader of a gang called the Skinhead Dogs at the time. The gang was incredibly violent. They had rap sheets on everybody in that gang, from stabbings to beatings to shootings. Just incredibly violent. They also did a lot of dope. They were friends with another gang from Sylmar called the Sylmar Family. There are about 12 to 13 guys in Sylmar Family, about 20 to 30 guys in Skinhead Dogs, depending on the time. There were a bunch of women who affiliated with the Skinhead Dogs. Okay, they had girlfriends. Skinhead Dogs did not treat women well. They treated them more like, objects. They passed them around, I'll put that gently, where they shared their women on occasion, things of that nature. Women were not, to be heard from. The guys ran the show, the whole deal. Very macho, gang style. You can't be a rat. Tough guy, you fight at the drop of a hat. about anything. Even best friends in the gang would fight.
Are these the skinhead dogs? Are they Oxnard based or Ventura based?
Both, but they started at Ventura High School and Bonnie High School, and then as they got older, they moved into Oxnard and other areas. Okay, and they did lots of crap in Ventura. They were responsible for a lot of crime, a lot of violence.
Bunch of assholes.
There are stories of a skinhead dog being in a supermarket, right, like at the Vons, right, and he thinks somebody's looking at him the wrong way. And they just go over and they just beat the shit out of the guy. And the guy's like, could be you or me.
Right.
They just beat the shit out of the guy because the guy gave me a look. And I'm not going to be disrespected that way.
I try not to make eye contact with those guys when I see them around town.
Well, I do now. Yeah. But I'd make eye contact, but different now. But so I read that whole file, and I know that there are various stories about what happened. And I know there's a cover-up because everybody's lying right away. So I know that it has to be right away. And the 3 people that got right away had to be prime suspect. And this is not massive detective work. This is just common sense. These 3 people, the various stories were these 3 people left together with a woman named April Porcho's wife at the time, and went back to Justin Merriman's house, which is right across the street from the courthouse at the time. And Katrina left the party saying she was going to Merriman's house, and Katrina was never seen again.
Where was the party?
The party was in Oxnard.
Okay.
And so, but everything falls apart from there. There are fake alibis given. There are various stories. Everybody claims not to know anything. And nobody saw Katrina. And nobody ever says they saw Katrina again after she leaves the party.
Okay, so far, just to mark where we're at, we have a party in November of 1992 in which the missing girl, who's 20 years old, is hanging out with a bunch of bad guys.
Right.
And everybody's lying about it now.
Right.
Okay.
And Katrina was living in Los Angeles with her family, was going to school at a junior college down there. And she left a note when she left that she was going to meet her family after Thanksgiving. This was the Friday after Thanksgiving. She's going to meet her family in Santa Barbara Saturday at an aunt's house or a grandma's house or something. And she left a note for her mom saying, see you Saturday at so-and-so's house. And so that was her mom and her family had no idea she was going to stop off in Ventura and hang out with these skinheads. That was something she did. And so when I read that, I said, okay, these 3 guys, Ryan Bush, Larry Nicasio, and Justin Merriman, they have to know what happened. They all lied to the cops. They all acted suspicious. The other thing that happened, here's a good tell. So LAPD gets the report of her car being found on Little Tujunga Boulevard in the Los Angeles Crest National Forest on that Saturday, the 29th. Okay?
Kind of like in the North Valley.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. It's near Sylmar.
Near Sylmar.
Near Sylmar, off a street called Little Tujunga. They find the truck. In the back of the truck, there's blood. They take the truck. They impound it. They don't do any kind of investigation at that point. Mom, Katie Montgomery, the mom, and her sister start calling everybody in Katrina's book and figure out that she showed up at the Porcho's house. Everybody at the Porcho's house is lying. April's lying to her. Scott's lying to her. Everybody's lying to her. And it's just bullshit statement after bullshit statement. We know that. LAPD sends cops to Ventura on the 30th. Okay, the morning of the 30th.
They've already found the car at this point?
They found the car. They know there's blood. They get here on the 30th in the morning. They get to the fact that, oh, Katrina said she was going to Merriman's house. Let's go to Merriman's house and check it out. These 2 cops from LAPD, and this is the infuriating part of the case to me. They show up to Merriman's house, and there's a carpet cleaner there on a Sunday morning at 8 a.m. cleaning the carpets. Okay, and
red flag,
and they go to Merriman's mother, a woman named Beverly Sue Merriman, who we'll talk more about later, I'm sure. They go to her, can we go inside the house and look around? We're looking for Katrina Montgomery, missing girl. Parents are worried, and she goes, get a fucking search warrant. And you know what they do? They drive back to LA.
They don't get a warrant.
They don't get a warrant. They don't do shit. They drive back to LA.
So the prime suspect in the murder of a 20-year-old girl, or one of the prime suspects, is visited...
The most logical suspect.
They visit his house where his mom is. His mom's got an emergency carpet cleaning happening.
Sunday morning.
And this doesn't send off any alarms on these LAPD dudes to, like, get the warrant. Are you just saying it's like a matter of, like, they're just not going to do it? They don't care? They don't...
I really don't know. I mean, I met the guys, and one of the guys was a really sweetheart of a guy. The other guy was kind of like a half-asser, but like, I'm like, what were you possibly thinking? He goes, we didn't think we had enough for a warrant. I go, you knew where she was, the truck with blood. You knew she'd been missing. We had statements that she was going to the house. These guys all lied to you. What do you mean you didn't know where the fuck she was? You know, you had enough to get a search warrant. Yeah, we probably should have done that.
Jeez.
Never did it. Never did it. The first search warrant done on Merriman's house was by me and Mark, November 23rd of 1997.
Years later.
5 years later. Literally 5 years later.
Wow. The carpet cleaning thing is amazing to me.
And turned out to be a huge part of the case.
It's just like the most obvious thing. It's like you get there and like they're just frantically cleaning the house. And it's kind of like, okay, we know someone's been killed. We know there's been blood. You know what I mean? Like there's they've already found the truck with the blood in it.
Right.
Did they test the blood at any point and figured out whose blood it is?
Yes, we did. They did that, or we may have done it. It was Katrina's blood. DNA came back to Katrina. And also in the truck was a pink fiber, blanket fiber, which became very important to us later on. Meant nothing at the time when they found it. It meant nothing to me until we eventually got to, let's put it this way, it meant nothing till it did. And it meant something to us. I could tell you the exact date, March 30th of 1998 is when it started meaning something to me.
Wow. Okay, we'll get to that. We'll save that as a...
But so I had that information, so I knew right away, and I'm like, okay, we can do this. I knew right. So I got the file, like the binders and stuff, and I ran them all down from everybody's desk. Probably by 8 a.m. I had everything the DA's office had on the binders. I eventually got everything LAPD had on the binders, but in their binders. But I got, and that's a story too. By about 5 p.m. on that Saturday, okay, I had come to the determination that Katrina died in Merriman's house and that Larry and Ryan were there. And we had to talk. I identified about 14 people we needed to talk to that could prove that point.
How are you gathering that? I mean, it's common sense, intuition, sort of reading the case and being like, I mean, obviously the carpet cleaning thing is sort of giving it away.
The carpet cleaning is a thing. Everybody said, we knew that the three guys went to Merriman's house. We knew Katrina was going there. There was obviously something they were cleaning up in that. I thought it was blood. So I knew that was my best clue. I knew Katrina was dead, by the way. I was not one of these people who thought she was going to miraculously come back off an adventure in Europe.
Did her family have some hope that was going to happen?
You know,
I know
until,
it's not realistic.
Until March 30th of 1998, maybe the mom, Katie Montgomery, had some hope. I think realistically they knew she was dead. I mean, you knew she was dead because she had credit cards and bank accounts that were untouched. There were no phone calls to anybody who knew her that she had communicated with freely before. She had a best friend she talked to every day. She had not heard from her since that day. So 20-year-old social young women do not just stop contact with everybody. Right?
Unless the wildest, most unlikely scenario is happening, like she's being held somewhere in some prison.
Right.
Yeah.
But so that was the case. The blood in the back of the truck is also a key thing. It came back to her.
Sad.
So you knew, it wasn't going to be happy that way. You know, we had two goals: figure out who did this and hold them responsible, and find Katrina. Those were the two goals, and I put those on a piece of paper. And I said, we got to find her, and we got to hold people who did this responsible. So once I identified the universe of people I thought would be relevant to this case, it turned out to be a bigger universe than I imagined. But when I figured out my first universe of people, I said, we're going to focus on all these people before we talk to these idiots, these three guys. We're going to try to get as much information, and then we're going to pressure these three guys as much as we can, and then we're going to try to find people who they would feel comfortable talking to for them to make statements. And that's what we did. Now, getting there was the hard part because I had to get Bunch off the case, and I wanted to get Mark on the case. And that was a huge fight in the office and caused a lot of issues for us long-term because of the politics of the DA's office.
So you knew what you wanted to achieve. You knew how you wanted to achieve it in terms of this is going to be a case that's built on talking with the people that know stuff.
Right.
But you don't want to do it with the investigators that you currently have who aren't super committed to that project.
Right.
How do you switch them out? How do you get Mark on the case?
Well, by that Sunday, so Saturday I read the whole file. By Sunday, I have a memo to the chief deputy saying, I want him off the case. I want Bunch off the case. And I gave examples for some of the interviews he did and how shitty those interviews were. Like, this guy ain't going to make it. And you guys can't give me this case and say you want me to be successful and straddle me with Bunch. And then by Monday morning, before lunch, I'm in the chief deputy's office. And he's telling me it's going to be, he wants to help me, but because of the politics in the DA's office, the DA's office is set up as kind of two different offices. There's the prosecutorial office and there's the investigation office.
Right.
The head of investigations is the chief deputy with the head of the investigations who's a cop. A guy named Richard Haas was the the head of the investigation. He's a cop, former VPD cop. He ran the Bureau of Investigations for the DA's office at the time. The chief deputy was a guy named Jeff Bennett. On the DA side, the chief deputy was a guy named Ron James. My supervisor was a guy named Richard Holmes. Those two branches of the office you would think would be working together, but they fought all the time, and they were constantly pushing Bradbury to choose one or the other to do things. Mm-hmm. So Haas was pissed at me because
are they working at cross purposes? Is it ego?
A lot of egos involved.
Yeah.
A lot of fire hydrants territory to piss on, fire hydrants to piss on.
Right.
So like Haas was pissed that I was going to investigate the case like an investigator. Like I made it clear from the beginning, I was going to be actively involved in the investigation. I was going to do interviews. I was going to direct the investigation. I wasn't going to listen to any cops. I wasn't going to take their advice. We're going to do it my way. And my theory was like, number one, and I truly believe this, just about every investigator or cop I'd worked with, I felt like I had a better idea how to prove shit than they did. I also thought I was smarter. Okay, the only guy I thought was Mark was a guy I thought was as smart as I was or smarter. That was it. I mean, I watched people do dumb shit in my cases over and over again, and I was helpless to stop them until this case where I was in charge. And I was like, nobody's going to fuck this up for me. If I fuck it up, I fuck it up. I can live with that. But I can't fuck it up if Dennis does it. I can't live with that. I couldn't handle him.
I need a minimally competent team here.
Yeah, and Dennis is competent, but I needed somebody better than him.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it took about 2 or 3 months to get Mark on the case. And as he said, kill his career. Because when that happened, Haas, I just basically got Bradbury to give me Mark on the case. I went over everybody's head, asked Mike directly, and he get it. Haas was livid at me. Richard was just pissed. That was it. That was the end of our relationship, basically.
Is there a sense that like the people in the office are thinking, "Damn it, Bamieh, we were supposed to you were supposed to just wrap this case up. Why are you pushing it so hard to actually solve it now? This wasn't what you were supposed to be doing."
You know what the beautiful thing
it's
about
your ambition that's driving you now.
The thing that was beautiful about that is that's exactly what they were mad about, because I was sucking up office resources, time. I mean, when we got rolling on this thing, there were times we had 30 to 40 officers, investigators, police officers, sheriffs working the case. Mm-hmm. Okay. We were sucking up a shitload of resources. Okay. And overtime and stuff like that. And the
Bradbury's approving all of this?
Yeah. Because the problem they had was they could never say, we don't want you to solve it. They can make it hard for you, which they did, but they can't say it. And when I got close enough where they knew I had a chance, they were fucked. They couldn't stop me then because politically it was impossible. And I'm like, I just call them out at the time. You have to understand, okay, so at the DA's office, there's a lot of people there that need to be prosecutors. They're not going to get other jobs. Okay? They really believe that. They're worried about being fired. They're worried about losing that job. That was never a fear of mine. Okay, that gives me a huge advantage. There's never been a job I've had that I was worried about getting fired from.
If you're a prosecutor, are you like constantly fighting for your job or something? Is there like not a tenure system? Like how does that? Why are people fighting for their jobs?
Well, it's not just fighting for your jobs, because it's really hard to fire a tenured prosecutor.
Right.
However, I can give you a really shitty job. Okay, you can be prosecuting shitty cases for a long time. You could be working
just doing DUIs and stuff like that.
You could be doing all kinds of crap.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things they could fuck with you at work. But I had the belief, and the whole time I was there, that I could go get another job that was as good or better. I never worried about it. I really didn't. And my wife stressed all the time, thinking you're going to get your ass fired all the time, but I never worried about it. And they knew it, that I didn't give a shit. Okay, I was going to do my job, and then they knew I was good. I mean, I had really good results. I literally never lost. And so they knew that, and they knew
the
that
stakes are so much higher on this case, though, it seems like in the previous cases.
But like, here's the thing about that. Yeah, I knew that, but I knew I don't look at the negative so much. I looked at the opportunity.
No, you have the mind of a gambler in a lot of ways, where it's just like, my eyes are on the prize, and I'm going to fucking
The
win
opportunity
it.
was huge.
Yeah.
First of all, I will tell you, like, part of me was like, I'm going to stick it up all their asses. I'm going to show them if you just do it the right way, it can be done, and that their way is not the right way, mine is. And when I get this guy, and they're all going to want to get part of the credit for it, and I was going to give it to him.
What's really interesting about this case, I mean, there are a million angles on it, but one of them, to me, is just for you, Ron, in terms of your evolution as an attorney, as a person, is sort of your admission that you want to win this case. This case is about, in a lot of ways, your own personal ambition in trying to just win, show people how smart you are, show people that you're better than everybody else. But there's also, at some point, it becomes about more than that for you.
Well,
like the drive is...
Well, first of all, we talked about this in the first podcast. You asked me when I switched teams, and I told you I've always been on the same team. Team Ron.
Team Bamieh.
Right.
Yeah.
That's always been my thing. But it's not just to show people I'm smart. That's not it. My thing was this, that if you want to be elite at something, okay, everybody could say, I'm really good lawyer. There's so many guys who will say that, okay? All right. You'll hear it all the time. So many women will say that. I'm really good at this. I'm really good at this. I'm really good. But I think that's all bullshit until you prove it. Okay? Until you prove it. Show me you could do something that somebody else couldn't have done. Okay? Show me. If you can do that, I'll believe you. Okay? And this was the chance to show them that, and I want to be considered to be the best at my job. Like I always tell people, I did a murder trial when I was a defense attorney, and it was one of these deals where they had an informant, and I had wanted to prove the informant was actually the killer, and my guy was innocent. Right? That was the whole theory of the case. And I stood up in my opening statement, and I told them, look, by the end of this thing, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to show you that I'm not only the best defense lawyer in this room. There was a co-defendant who was represented by somebody. Not only am I the best defense lawyer in this room, I'm going to prove to you I'm the best prosecutor in the room, because I'm going to show you enough evidence to convict their informant. And the DA got upset, this woman named Stacey Ratner. And she was like, how could you say that? You're just insulting me. And I go, Stacey, if you don't think I believe that, I'm not just saying it. I believe it. I go, I'm the best prosecutor in this room. I'm the best defense attorney in this room. I'm going to prove it to you. And I did in that case, but this one was a chance to show them, you guys couldn't do this. You had all these senior prosecutors, these investigators you all want to laud. Like Dennis had been investigating for 30 years, Bunch for 30 years, and they couldn't do shit with this case. And this guy who's been doing major crimes for 5 months is going to take this case in the next 4 years, show you that, yeah, it can be solved. And not only did we solve it, and by the way, in terms of the credit for this case, just so we're clear, I give Mark most of it. Okay. Without him, this case does not get solved. Without him having my back the way he had my back, without his ideas, without his drive, without his willingness to stay up with me till 3 a.m., sitting on somebody's house, waiting for them to walk out of it so we could talk to him, without us running wire operations by ourselves on the avenue with no backup, the balls he had to do what we did, nobody in that DA's office had. And no investigator Dennis wouldn't have done it. He refused because we didn't have permission all the time.
Well, Mark is. I can't wait to hear more about Mark, because he's a person that it seems like is your equal in a lot of ways in terms of the confidence he has in himself and the ambition he has to solve something, to do anything. Anything he needs to do to solve this.
And let me tell you,
it makes sense that you didn't like him at the beginning, because you don't like meeting yourself.
No, but we and I love Mark, and he's one of my closest friends, but we fought all the time during this case in terms of arguing. I won't say fought. We're not physically fighting. We're arguing all the time about how to do stuff. And the thing is, when one of us convinced the other that they were right, we conceded. It was never about who was right. It was always what was best. And Dennis just came along for the ride eventually. And so once Mark got on the case, so in August of 1997, we'll start ending it here. I know we've been going long, but let me just put it in framework so we can pick up someplace else.
Sounds good.
So I got the case May of 1997. Okay. In August of 1997, Mark was the investigator on the case, and I wrote probably a 50-page memo on here's how we do it. Mark obviously had a lot of input on that memo. Here's how we solve the case. And the plan was this. We are going to pressure Nicasio, Bush, and Merriman for the next 3 months as hard as we can. We're going to interview freaking family members, girlfriends, gang members, anybody we can. We're going to go to prisons. We're going to go wherever we can. We're going to search their houses. We're going to wiretap their phones. And we're going to call a grand jury, and we're going to call anybody that would know them to that grand jury. Not to get an indictment, but just so they feel us coming. And then, when we're done, if we get any statements that allow us to arrest either Nicasio or Bush, we're going to arrest him, and we're going to pressure Nicasio until he breaks and he cooperates with us. And we're going to use him to get the rest of them. And We identified 5 people I thought could be informants, and we're going to work them to make them wear wires, not make them, ask them to wear wires for a benefit, the benefit being less time in prison or jail. And we're going to work these guys as informants and get them to wear wires and get statements from any of the 3 suspects, especially Merriman. I believe that Merriman was the heavy because Nicasio was 16, Bush was 18. Merriman was much more violent. His letters to Katrina were very sexual.
How old was he?
He was 21.
Okay.
Merriman was one of the leaders of the gang. In my memo I write, there's no way Nicasio could have done this in Merriman's house because the gang culture would not allow a 16-year-old guy to kill a woman in the senior gang member's house. Just would not be allowed. I said, so logically, it just doesn't work for me. Merriman's the most logical guy. He's the most violent guy. He also has, at least with Katrina, this really sexualized relationship, which we saw in letters he wrote from prison to her.
Were those part of the original binders that you got? How'd you get those letters?
They were Katie Montgomery gave them to investigators in 93, 92, somewhere in there.
Katie Montgomery is Katrina's mother.
Yes.
And at what point do you meet her? Maybe we can end with that because it seems like that's that carries us. To me, that's such an important moment because it bonds the 2 elements of this case for you, Ron, which are the ambitious, career-defining part of it with the pathos, the emotion, the sentiment of wanting to do something for this mother who's lost her daughter.
And I will tell you that, and I'm still friends with the Montgomery family, and I still think of them quite frequently, actually. So
how could you not?
In the summer of 97, Dennis took me to meet the Montgomerys, and I sat down with Katie, Mike Montgomery, her dad, this woman named Lee Smith, now Lee Jensen, who was Katrina's best friend. And we talked. And at the end of the talk, I told them that, because they'd been told for a while that they didn't think the case could be solved. And I told Katie that I believed the case could be solved, that we would solve it, and we would find Katrina. And she said something like, I'd like to believe you. And I said, I'm going to come through for you guys. I promised them. And Dennis was pissed that I made that promise. And I said, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. But I believed it. I honestly believed that the case could be solved. Like, it was not, first of all, I knew that everybody involved in this were idiots. Okay. And my point to Dennis and to everybody else at the time was like, if we can't outsmart a bunch of skinheads
that are like 16, 18, and 21.
Well, they were older then, but yes, if we can't outsmart these people and we can't bend them to our will and get them to come to Jesus, figuratively, not literally, then we're really not good at our jobs. And I told Dennis, I go, look, he goes, well, we couldn't have done it he was mad in the car. I remember him saying, he goes, well, we haven't done it yet. And I go, yeah, that tells you something. What you're doing is not working. You can't keep doing what you're doing if it's not working. You got to do something different. So let's do it differently. And everybody thought, like, when I proposed that we were going to run wires in the jail, for instance, that was part of my memo, that we're going to run wires in the jail. We're going to get these guys in custody.
Is that a pretty common practice?
Never done before. We were the first in Ventura County to do it.
Really?
It was a controversial Supreme Court case in Illinois that they did it with a cop as the informant playing inmate. But my plan was to use other inmates wearing wires in the jail. We'll talk about what a shit show that was just to get it approved. And we had all these tools at our disposal. And by the way, we're using late 90s technology, which was not what it is today.
Right.
Today it'd have been so much easier.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything then was bulkier, bigger.
And people have phones now, too, that
right.
are like, I think there are apps that you can record on a phone. It doesn't even look like it's recording.
Yeah, there are. But back then, the stuff we were using and how we did it was amazing. So we ended up in this case, before it was all said and done, we ended up convicting total over 30 skinhead gang members and their associates. They're not all gang members. 30 skinhead gang members and associates, like people who were assisting them.
Okay, well, we'll save that for part 2. Because the sort of process of this investigation and the wires in jail and everything, all the drama of figuring out who you can talk to that can tell you what happened to Katrina Montgomery is just a really compelling and detailed thing. So we'll talk about that next time. But it seems like that promise you made to her mom, was that something that you ever felt like, oh, geez, like I I overstepped by making that promise, or did it drive you? Because it feels
Well,
like that's an engine.
What I did when I got back to my office after meeting her the next day, is I took the booking photos. They all had booking photos, not from our case, but from other cases. I took the booking photos of all the people I thought were responsible, and I made a circle on my office. I know you weren't a student then, but
No, I was in college. Yeah.
many of my former students, mock trial officers, remember this. I had a circle on my wall with these pictures. Right in the middle were Larry Nicasio, Ryan Bush, and Justin Merriman in the middle of it, and all these people around them. Right, and then, and on my desk in front of me was a picture of Katrina on the last Easter she had with her family. And every day, my point to myself was, every day I look at these pictures and I say, what have I done to find her killers? What have I done to find her? And I would say that to myself every day. What did I do today to find her killer? What did I do today to see how did we get any closer today? And I have a journal. I'm writing a book now, as you know, about this whole thing. And I have a journal that I'm using as my refresher of my memory. I have this detailed journal that I kept at the DA's office that shows time and place, what we were doing, what I was thinking, that helps me write everything. Meetings I had with people, whatever. And every day, the first question I'd ask myself in the journal is, what have we done today to solve Katrina? And then it changes to, what are we going to do today to convict Merriman?
To be continued.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.